All right, welcome to another edition of the Spread Effect Show. Today, joined by Ross Hudgens from up the road in LA. Ross is the founder of Seige Media, longtime SEO contacting industry. You've probably seen him speak at some of the industry events and might follow his blog as well. He's one of the better writers in SEO for sure. So thanks for coming on, Ross.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
All
Excited.
right, sweet. Well, first things first, we were just talking off camera, I think they call it, about Ross possibly coming down to sunny San Diego.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm just thinking. Always kind of had my eye on San Diego. It seems a little underutilized, or at least underrepresented from consulting side. You sort of told me different, but at least from the people in the space that I think of, I know Sear Interactive is moving down there.
Uh-huh.
Similar people to me that are kind of like doing the blogging, speaking thing. There's not many companies of that type there, so maybe that's a nice niche. And San Diego is just an amazing place, as far as I know. So seems like a good place to move
No,
down.
yeah, I agree. And I knew Sierra was coming down here. I think that'll be great for the community. I mean, more good people down here in SEO is good for everybody. I think there are maybe a little more the under the rock or smaller local agencies down here, but especially compared to LA, I mean, obviously there's a lot of opportunity and still a lot of presence to pick up clients, and the lifestyle's not too bad either. So
Yeah.
we will welcome you with open
That's-
arms.
that's-
Well, I'd like to talk to you today about a bunch of different stuff. I mean, yeah, I think you've done a really good job of branding yourself in the industry through blogging and speaking, and maybe talking about some of the strategies you've used there. Also, I know you've written a lot about link building, and then we're kind of on the same side of the fence, and as far as fulfilling that and scaling that, both for ourselves sometimes and for partners and clients. So maybe we can talk through some of those challenges and some of your insights, and then also just deciding to become an entrepreneur and go out on your own. I think that's something that we both shared and have gone through, and I know you've been doing it for about a year now with Siege. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that first. I mean, what led you to make that decision? How long had you been in SEO, kind of on the side of working in house before you made that decision, and I don't know your whole thought process because it's really cool.
yeah. I ended up. So I had always kind of blogged on the side. When I was working at an agency called Single Gray in San Francisco about all my time was kind of messed up, but 4 or 5 years ago, and that's when I started blogging. And I always kind of just enjoyed writing and doing that thing on the side. And of course, it just kind of transitioned to writing about what I was working on, which was SEO.
Hmm.
And, jumped in house and started building more of a following through that writing. And because of that, I had started building up an audience. I never really thought of myself as a traditional entrepreneur. Like, I didn't think that was going to be what I would do from the get-go. It was not really an end goal, but it became something that was extremely easy to see as something that would be successful for me because of that audience I had built just blogging over time. And it was really independent of the actual work I was doing in-house, but because I had blogged and talked about some of the things I learned in-house and on the agency side, suddenly I started getting contacted by people that wanted me to do consulting work
Right.
at night when I wasn't working or in weekends. And eventually it just kind of made sense to make that jump because I had built up that equity on the side that I wasn't leveraging in any way other than occasional consulting gigs that couldn't take much too much.
How do you think you were able to really build that following? I mean, that's easier said than done. I think everybody knows how to start a blog. Most of them don't get read. There's usually just crickets and no comments and no social shares and whatever. You coming into an industry where there's already a lot of bloggers and voices in the industry, like what made it stick? Was there a few different things that really, put your name out there and made people want to follow you? Is it just because you're a good writer? What do you think made it work?
It was definitely a grind. Like the first six months, if you read the beginning of my blog, first 6 months to a year, I just ranted on random stuff, and there was no traction I really gained at all. It was
Hmm.
good to have a personal blog. One that I actually invested in a decent looking blog. I don't think it's amazing looking, but it wasn't templated. And over time, I just talked about the challenges that I was practicing in house. So I never deliberately said, I'm going to write some blog post today. Most of the time this is the challenge I'm facing. I know no one has written about this, so I'm going to write about this challenge. And the more that, once that kind of spark occurred for whatever that blog post idea was, then I would write about it. And when you start start doing that over time, I think it just becomes kind of natural to have those idea sparks that this would be a good blog post if your mind is kind of just in that framework,
Hmm.
doing that all the time.
And was that something you were just doing at night after your full-time gig? I mean, just putting in the extra hours with the thought that this is fun, this is something I like to do, and then eventually you got to the point where you started to think, hey, this is an asset that might be able to support my own business moving forward. Maybe I can take the leap.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
for sure. And it was always something maybe independent of whether or not I use it to make the jump. I was very deliberate, and this was going to grow my brand and allow me to grow my career.
Hmm.
So it also allowed me before I made the jump to get new jobs, to get another raise down the line, a significant raise through just having that awareness online that I could get also other jobs. And that was kind of the thought process.
Right, right. So, how did speaking come into play in this? I mean, was it kind of a lot? Do you think you were able to secure speaking gigs because of your blog? And was it deliberate as far as building the brand while you were still in house at Single Grain or wherever else? How did you even pull off becoming a speaker at an SMX or an SES or a PubCon?
I think so. The first speaking gig I got, it was definitely kind of opened the doors. Was I actually applied to be a writer for Search Engine Land,
Hmm.
and Elizabeth I won't even say her last name. She's the editor there. So, she's the editor there, and she does the link building editing. She also manages the conference, so she picks panels, things like that. So because I had worked with her, she had established trust with me. She
Hmm.
eventually picked me for a panel. So that was kind of a nice entry point to get some kind of something on my resume that I had spoke before.
Right.
But in connection with that, I think it's just blogging online and having trust. Chris Winfield also asked me to speak. I don't think that mattered that I had spoken at SMEX before that, but just because you had blogged and sound like you knew what you were talking about, I think a lot of, at least in my opinion, even if you're not a great public speaker up front, as long as your content is pretty good from a speaking perspective, it can make up for a lot of inefficiencies on that side.
For sure, even in this industry, or especially in this industry, I guess. I mean, content can go a long way. I don't. Some of the speakers are not necessarily professional speakers, and just
Yeah.
getting a useful content out of any SEO presentation would be nice because there's a lot of recycled jargon and garbage at those events. One of your posts talked about understanding the format of the place where you're going to speak, and that being an asset in pitching, a panel spot or a speaking gig. What's your thought process there, and really, what is the advice to people out there that want to actually secure? Because I'm sure that 300 people submit to get speaking gigs, and only 5 of them get them.
Yeah, yeah. It depends on if it's a panel format. So that spoke specifically to a panel format like SMX. I haven't been to SES, but I imagine they're similar.
Yeah.
Um, but they essentially create a narrative structure. The moderator wants to create a narrative structure where if they're talking about real author or something like that, you don't necessarily want 4 people all talking about how do you actually implement real author. That's not a very informative panel. They want to create an arc to that. So
Hmm.
if you're thinking as a speaker, everyone's going to pitch that how to implement real author piece of it. You could go into something else like this is the future of real author. If you have the idea that less people are going to pitch that little niche, and therefore you sub-segment yourself and become maybe one of 5 pitching that rather than one
Testing.
of 295
Testing.
audio.
I don't
Sorry.
know.
I think I had garage. I was testing the Mac. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Hopefully you can edit that.
Yeah, we can. I don't know. We like to keep it raw. We might just keep going.
Yeah, I had GarageBand testing the mic in the background. And I guess I just had it playing the
Nice.
entire time. Okay, sorry.
That's all right. So yeah, I mean, it's almost like a PR pitch in a way. Understanding what the audience is going to be, the person picking these gigs. They have a session on Rel Author. That's a hot topic. Pitching something a little different, a little. This is how to apply Rel Author in a different way and not a generic way. And really, you only get like let's say 100 words to really pitch a session sometimes too. It kind of is almost more like, what can I say that is crafty enough and going to be interesting enough that they would like to add it to the flavor of this panel, and then you can worry about the content afterward in some sense.
Yeah, exactly. I would also sort of warn sometimes where maybe not speak to something that you're not expert at either.
Sure.
So sometimes people might misapply that advice and pitch something they don't even really want to speak about. It's not going to get them any clients or benefit in any way, I guess, other than having it on your resume, which is a good thing.
Right.
That's something to think about too. Other ways I've gotten accepted, I think, is that I had social proof sometimes. So I would actually pitch a blog post that I had written that had already gotten a lot of traction and say, this is specifically about the panel that they're going to talk about. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Like they talked about Penguin, and I helped a company. I didn't really do too much, but I helped a company with Penguin and posted it on Moz and used that as my pitch. And I think that's a big reason why I accepted, because that was a very popular post on Moz.
Nice.
So any kind of like tie-in like that as social proof, I think is good too.
Well, you've done a good job at, I mean, just promoting yourself and building a brand, obviously. And, I like hearing all those strategies. With your company now, with Seige, does a lot of the business come just directly from that personal brand? I mean, is that where it all comes from? Do you have to do any real advertising, or is it all just, Ross is out there, he's speaking at the conference, he's got the blog, people find him, and that's how you've been able to build the biz?
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of nice that way. And I found once I've gotten going is starting to rethink things like speaking. It's a good activity, but it can also be low ROI as compared to just traditional blogging. If you think about, if I fly to the East Coast and that's going to take a day out of my time and a day coming back, that's real time loss that I can't put towards the business. And also you have to really think about, am I going to generate clients from these kinds of things? But generally it was that definitely started the ball rolling. And then once you just start doing work, most of it, as I'm sure you know, it's just like doing great work for people and you're going to get referrals.
Sure.
It's kind of been, I haven't really had that as much time speaking or blogging as I want to, because I've spent more time running the business now and hopefully doing good work for people.
Right.
Which takes more of my time.
Makes sense. And I guess especially when you're small, I mean, you have to really weigh that time loss or whatever given up to fly to the East Coast, like you mentioned. As an entrepreneur and growing this business, are you looking ahead? Are you going to try to scale out? Do you want to stay small? What are some of the challenges there that you see in the next year?
Yeah, it's difficult transition right now. One of the difficult things that's going to happen is transitioning to San Diego in December. So it's kind of been a slow period where I can't really hire if I wanted to hire, because I have to hire locally, or I could maybe start hiring people in San Diego. That's a difficult pain point for me right now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know exactly what I most enjoy doing yet for the business. I kind of set it up so I could hopefully, Seige Media is kind of like could be anything. So it's the hope. I don't know, pure consulting, fulfillment. Right now, it's not totally sure whether or not I want to go crazy scale or not.
Right on. Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out. I got all these people in my hallway yelling. What are these kids doing? Anyway, yeah, once you do have a company at 25, you got to deal with all these rowdy kids down here. There's a lot of talent in San Diego, though. I will say there's a lot of experienced young talent that you can still pick up, I think, that have worked at agencies and worked on SEO campaigns and stuff like that. So I think it is a good place to grow your business, if nothing else. Go San Diego. Let me ask you this. I think every SEO I meet that does consulting also has side projects where they're investing, they're buying out a domain and building it out. They do affiliate marketing. They're only doing consulting to generate some cash so they can go after their real dream. Do you fit into that? Do you fit into that bucket right now, or is it you think you might in the future? I mean, I don't know. I'm always curious because everybody we work with is like, well, I also have this side thing. Can you work on that? Fulfill links for me for that too, or it's always the story.
Yeah, it's definitely something I think about a lot. And I had more properties even a year ago that now are kind of just on cash cow mode, because I kind of saw the future of Google and kind of where it's already going right now. It's increasingly hard to build lead gen properties that can really have, in my opinion, have a long-term sustainable future, because Google wants to reward brands and things like that. So making a traditional website that's not affiliate or lead gen that can make a lot of money seems kind of tough. Like, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
And they're
no, I feel the same way, man. We had a lot of like, like exact match plays or just good domains that had H to them and niches that, 5 years ago you could really monetize well through ads or affiliate offers or lead gen, and
yeah,
it just became a struggle to keep even a couple of those ranking well because they seem to need so much attention from the content side, from the social side, and then in the end of the day, I mean, they're not Charles Schwab or U.S. Bank. Like my sexy little retirement domain is just gonna fall down in my
yeah,
feeling.
yeah, I agree. And I am still trying to come up with ideas. A little echo.
I'm sorry.
Trying to come up with some ideas. Um, but I think it needs to be powered through Facebook or social or some other kind of channel where hopefully the good idea powers it, not primarily through search.
Yeah.
So, and of course, those kinds of ideas are harder to come by, and they're probably a lot more labor intensive than just rank number one and um, watch the money come in as it used to be like 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. Right. Well, okay. So, I mean, that's from the perspective of growing your own websites. I mean, let's talk a little bit about on the client side because, I mean, they're still out there competing in the search engines and they're in the same environment as well. What sort of things are you doing differently or have you started to do differently in the last 6 months as far as link building or maybe authorship? I don't know. What's the flavor of the day in July 2013?
um, I've been trying to think of more ways to do content that's scalable, but still not like at risk scalable. So maybe I kind of think of it as double. You're going for a double content.
Hmm.
So I'm not really in the realm where I'm going to spend 10K on HTML5 interactive infographic or whatnot.
Hmm.
But if there's maybe a small win, whether it's just a really in-depth text guide that we can do broken link building to, or come up with a content idea that we can do somewhat cheaply with graphic designers that we have as resources, and then get 10 to 20 links. It's not going to knock it out of the park, but we have a clear idea up front that it can get content, that it can get links based on market research and things like that.
Hmm.
Just kind of small to medium ideas that we can hopefully execute on with a smaller shop, and then get between, based on market research, get between 10 and 30 links, hopefully. Maybe produce that content, hopefully, for $2,000 to $3,000 in costs, maybe less than that.
Hmm.
Just depends. But that's kind of what we're aiming for, is to build small, medium-sized content that anyone can really get up and create. Just make it successful based on being doing the market research and also just putting a ton of work into it to make it look epic, that you just did the work up front rather than the really intensive 10K kind of cost things that right now seem really risky, and you're probably not going to push through a lot of clients.
Hmm. It makes sense. I mean, you can't fake it one way or the other, but maybe you can still produce something of quality, especially for a medium-sized or small-sized client that only does cost a couple K. And you mentioned broken link building as maybe one of the tactics to go out and do that. Does that become part of the market research at all, where you're like, you've got a client in a niche and you go out and try to maybe do some of that up front and say, well, hey, here's some place publishers we could approach about maybe fixing a broken link or mentioning us as well as we create this content. Is that part of the market research as well, not just researching what content to create?
Yeah, for sure. So we use tools like Link Prospector, brokenlinkbuilding.com. All are pretty good at finding link lists. And then we'll check out. Sometimes you'll get a ton of link lists or a ton of links, and they won't necessarily be the kind that will actually link to your client. So that's important to actually evaluate. Are these link lists actually places we can get placed?
Hmm.
So then that's the kind of research I'm talking about. Like, is this an actual site that'll link to us? Because sometimes there will be links pages that just have no, like maybe it's a more commercial kind of property. It's not going to link out, even if they have a links page a lot of
Right.
the time. So definitely that kind of upfront market research is super important to see if it's going to be successful or not, and make it less risky.
Hmm. And do you feel like that? You talk a lot about on your blog about scalable link building and not just the tactics, but also the processes that you install with the people that are really doing the work. I mean, it's a labor-intensive process. It's a boring process. It's probably a broken process in a lot of companies. Um, the tactics you just described, I mean, that seems relatively scalable, and it doesn't include a lot of the just blast out emails to everybody blindly. I mean, I'm really just interested to ease into that conversation with you a little bit about what is scalable link building? What do people screw up? I mean, I was reading one of the tips you had on your site about not loading images when you're going out and checking out potential sites to hit up, and I thought that was genius because it saves so much time as far as you've got someone there, you're hired them, paid $10 an hour to look at sites and put them on a list or email them, and the second they get distracted, you just lost 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, exactly. All of those little things can add up, and honestly, I have not used that tactic for a while. It's interesting, like, and it's just part of the process in writing blog posts. Also, a great thing about blogging is it refines your own process. You think more about what you're doing because you got to put it on paper.
Right.
And there's little efficiencies that break down over time when you're doing things, but for sure, I'm always thinking about how we can do link building more scalably. But for sure, also, it's kind of today it's a lot harder than it ever has been before, as I'm sure you know. And there's like that same article that I wrote 3 years ago that I think you tweeted yesterday. I'm a lot of those tactics I'm not sure work the same way,
I
or at
should have
least
put that as a disclaimer, perhaps. My
a lot of
bad.
it is just like basic blocking and tackling. But
Yeah,
when we originally did that, it was a lot more like you could blast out 500 emails without any kind of customization
sure.
and get away with those kinds of things. Just because it made sense. But today you need there's always going to be little custom pieces, in my opinion, that you need for each email. Like you got to spend an extra 5 to 20 seconds writing an extra sentence or two.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to make the difference between it getting placed or not. And that's going to add up to a lot of time, and it's going to be painful. And and I'd be interested to see what kind of stuff you guys are working, because to me, there's like, especially with the guest post stuff, a lot of stuff that's come out recently about Google recommending that you should follow the bios and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily believe makes sense, or it's a little over the top to me. But
No, yeah, I agree.
makes me think twice about that. Seemed like the last scalable real activity in link building was this guest post process, and
Right.
now they're recommending that you should follow your author bio. It makes me think twice about even having that as something I build out as efficiency of Seige Media.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they've got their sights set on that tactic, and I mean, it is abused, especially on the lower end, and it's easy to say anything labeled a guest post could be devalued or have an extra set of eyes put on it. So I don't know, it's the same cat and mouse game as forever, trying to do things that are even a step beyond that, but it still is a guest post. I don't know. I think of some of the ways that you've built, your own brand and gone out there and built Ross Hudgens up and written on these sites. Is that something you've tried to translate over to the client side? Because for us, it definitely has been, where it's more like building up authorship for them. And that's also hard to scale as well, and something we're trying to figure out. But is that something you ever turn to the client and say, I've been able to build my own personal brand this way. Is there anyone in-house that we could identify that's already there that we could do a lot of posts on in certain sites and then leverage up to bigger sites in your community, and that would have long-term value? Is that something you've approached at all?
Yeah, definitely a little bit. The current set of clients I have, there's no real personal brand representative. Maybe one of them, there's good fits there, but we do think about when potentially we do guest post outreach, even though it's become a smaller piece of what we do, that hopefully they're using a brand representative. Maybe we're doing the outreach and then they're placing it using their name person on the site. So
Right.
That way they're building a little equity with them, and hopefully they're the content experts. So they're more likely to write something of quality that's actually going to get placed,
Right.
as opposed to us. So that's normally what we're going for now, especially more complex niches where it's not as possible to do it on our site.
Right. Yeah, I
But
think we're seeing that too. Like, and well, you mentioned also a lot of the clients don't necessarily have a brand representative, and that's a big problem. I mean,
yeah,
whereas now that becomes like this key piece where it's like we need a face, we need a name, and it's complicated beyond just the surface level of like, well, no one does it already. It's like, all right, well, we could have the CTO do it, but what if he leaves? he might get picky about the content that's put out under his name. Does he have time to write it? Should we ghost write it? I mean, it's kind of a messy situation.
Yeah, I've seen those conflicts. I recommended one company use brand names, and they were worried that their employees would leave for sure. And instead, it was just like some weird, tacky business blog name as their Twitter account,
Hmm.
things like that. It was like a not personal photo. And in my opinion, those kinds of things, as personal brand efficiencies, cause you to lose a lot of traction because people don't want to follow a company account; they want to follow a person. And that's one of the great benefits of building out a personal brand and using that to get links for obvious reasons.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting I'm curious where it's going to go in the next couple of years and what truly remains scalable and effective for people kind of in our position, either as consultants or vendors or fulfillers on these campaigns. I mean, a lot of the agencies I think are stuck in the mode of, they have X budget per month and this is how they've always fulfilled it. They've pushed X to content, X to links, X to design. They've worked in infographics at one point. I mean, there's a lot of momentum there, I guess, that's going to be hard to change and shift. And I don't know, it's kind of flying in the face of some of Google's changes. I don't know. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
find my where I can make money in this whole game.
Yeah, it's tough. So thankfully, how big are you guys? 25 people, you said?
Yeah,
Nice. So a little harder to move the ship, but not um, impossible.
right, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have all these good people with knowledge and experience and the client relationships there. I think it really just becomes a, a function of pivoting to a new type of fulfillment that's somewhat similar but still valuable. And I guess you do have a lot of momentum with those people as well, and the relationships, I guess, is what I'm keying in on. That the business isn't going to suffer or go away. It's just always a curious business to be a part of because it's so different than if you're in insurance or mortgages or something like that. Like, the VA loan program doesn't disappear overnight or the guidelines don't change typically overnight. You're always chasing a moving target in this industry, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so strange compared to other businesses that I'm involved with.
Yeah. I mean that's why it makes me think as a consulting company, and again, it's the problem of scale. It's just like doing more traditional marketing as attached to digital as much as we possibly can,
Hmm.
and the way we can like drive KPIs through doing that. And for SEOs, us as SEOs, it's not something that is kind of like inherent or ingrained in us. So it's kind of a difficult process to transition to traditional marketing. But if we just do traditional digital marketing and are capable of selling that, that's sustainable. That's gonna drive traffic and organic growth for our clients, and not really be a moving target because that's always going to be the thing.
Right.
Um, I,
How, how would you approach like adding that capacity to Siege? Like I would just go out and find somebody that's already been doing it and bring them on either as a salesman or a consultant or maybe even a partner in the company, or would you try to build up that capacity capacity or competency yourself personally, like try to learn a new trade?
it's definitely hard. I don't know the answer to that
Yeah.
question. More from the content side, I think about it that way is hopefully the kind of content we're building, it's on a small level, but still has some kind of marketing where it applies. Is still not the case in every industry. You unfortunately still got to build links just to build links, but there's some clients we have, thankfully, where the content we're building is actually a driver of non-organic metrics. Like
Mm.
it's going to drive direct traffic, brand signals, are going to get press coverage. All of those things are positive metrics outside traditional SEO, but how you build those competencies um, and sell that outside the straight SEO is tough.
Mhm.
So right now I'm doing that and connecting it very directly to links.
Mhm.
So every piece of content hopefully has a double capability, but it also is always going to have links at the core for now.
Makes sense. Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you actually about the LA scene since you've been up there for a little bit, and I know you're busting out of town, but have there been any valuable like meetup groups, or is there any SEO community there that you've connected with that you've found valuable? Any that we could even throw on the radar since we're kind of in the backyard that we should shoot up and check out?
Honestly, I haven't seen too much.
Okay.
So it's not. So LA, I'm sure is fine. I know Santa Monica has some good stuff there from the tech side. LA does as well, but just the reality of LA is traffic's so bad. So if I work a 9 to 5 day, which I hopefully don't work a 9 to 5 day, uh, but then go somewhere, the traffic's going to be horrible. So I can't make it to a meetup group in Santa Monica
Yeah.
without cutting out 3 hours of my day or something like that, or just accounting for that. Same with LA. So for those reasons, I'm in Long Beach. For people who don't know that, it's very close but very far from everything. So for that reason, and specifically in Long Beach, there's not really any scene at all.
Hmm.
There's a few good people that I've met here, but already knew them. So I definitely wouldn't recommend coming to Long Beach.
All right, well, we'll stick down to our friends here in San Diego. When you do get down here, we run a little group and or a couple of them actually. So you have to come out there and meet a few folk and get plugged in. But we're excited to have you coming down this way, man, for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to come down. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the meetups and stuff too. I'd love to run meetups eventually. Um, but you guys run it? You run one yourself?
Yeah, we've had a group that's like I mean, it's SEO focused, but it's also just internet marketers, entrepreneurs, investors, real estate guys. I mean, really just kind of our personal sphere that we've had for like 3 or 4 years here. That's a good group. It's like 100 people that we do a couple times a year.
Okay.
No agenda, just hang out sort of thing. And then one of our VPs also runs an SEO specific meetup here that brings in good speakers and has done things with Distilled when they were in town. And it's a decent one too. It's kind of a bit of a different crowd as well, like the downtown crowd. So we got
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, awesome, man. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this. I really, encourage people to go out there and follow your stuff. Even read your 3-year-old posts because they might get a tip or two from that. And
Yeah.
keep up with Siege Media, and hopefully see you speaking at the conferences. And yeah, best of luck, and we'll see you soon down in SD.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, see you, Rob.